They say money can buy anything except a clean conscience and a life free from secrets. Alexander Caldwell, the dashing heir to the colossal Caldwell Industries, thought he had it all unimaginable wealth charm that could coax bankers into giving him more credit than he'd ever need, and the devotion of a beautiful wife who carried his heir. But in one reckless, passionate decision, he destroyed that picture-perfect life, marrying the intoxicating mistress who had dazzled him with promises of freedom and endless adventure. Little did Alexander know the real storm was about to start when his pregnant wife resurfaced with a truth more shocking than any rumor money could bury. Alexander Caldwell was born into a legacy of power and prestige. His grandfather, the late Sir Theodore Caldwell, had founded Caldwell Industries, specializing in luxury real estate developments across the globe. Through shrewd deals and bold expansions, the Caldwell family had seen their name etched into the pillars of high society. From a very early age, Alexander was groomed to inherit not just a fortune, but the heavy mantle of responsibility that came with it. Growing up in a palatial estate on the outskirts of Bel Air, Alexander's every whim was catered to by nannies, tutors, and attendants. Yet beneath the surface of opulence, he harbored an unquenchable thirst for admiration. By the time he was a teenager, he relished the spotlight and the sense of power it brought. He excelled in his studies, more out of a desire to keep up appearances than any innate academic zeal, and attended the prestigious Kensington Preparatory Academy, where he learned the art of public poise and etiquette. His father, Arthur Caldwell, was a stern man whose business acumen was respected, even feared across the industry. He taught Alexander that love was an illusion that could derail focus, and that forging a marriage was ultimately a strategic alliance. Alexander's mother, Cassandra Caldwell, represented the softer side of the family, though she was equally adept at navigating the labyrinth of high society politics. This dual dynamic at home bred in Alexander a curious ambivalence toward intimacy. He wanted genuine affection, yet feared its ability to weaken him. Despite these conflicting inner forces, Alexander carried himself with effortless grace. At 25, he earned an MBA from Columbia, having spent time interning at various Caldwell Industries branches across Europe. The internship experiences validated one fact: Alexander was an excellent negotiator and a visionary who thrived in high-pressure environments. Around this time, he met the woman who would become his first wife, Rebecca Norton, the only daughter of a respected federal judge. Rebecca had a serenity about her that drew Alexander in from the start. She brought him a gentle reprieve from his father's relentless demands. Together, they seemed the perfect match, both physically striking and socially astute, with enough mutual family connections to please even the most exacting of high society circles. They married in a lavish ceremony, attended by the political elite, Hollywood celebrities, and members of old money families. Their wedding made headlines, marking what tabloids called the merger of the decade. Publicly, they were a dazzling power couple, each an ornament of sophistication. But as the first few months of marriage passed, small cracks began to appear. Alexander found comfort in the chase of bigger deals, traveling more frequently for Caldwell Industries. Rebecca, increasingly lonely, tried to hold on to the idea that their love was solid. Before they reached their second anniversary, she became pregnant, a development that should have brought them closer together. Instead, it exposed the widening gap between Alexander's restless appetite for excitement and his wife's quiet devotion. Neither could guess how fate would soon intervene, or how one woman, a siren from Alexander's social circles, would change everything. Long before he realized it, Alexander began to drift away from Rebecca. Their dinners grew shorter, their conversations more formal, and their nights lonelier. High society events piled up, and he found himself leaning into the adoration of the public eye. At charity galas and brand launches, Alexander was the star. Photographers and reporters fawned over him, business partners eagerly surrounded him, and hungry social climbers flirted shamelessly, hoping to catch his interest. It was at one of these charity events, an extravagant night raising funds for cutting-edge cancer research, that Alexander first laid eyes on Natalia Coronado. She was stunning, with a cascade of raven hair tumbling down her shoulders and eyes that flickered with mischief. When she was introduced as a new investor from Barcelona, Alexander offered the customary handshake, but electricity shot up his arm the moment their palms met. She wasn't your standard socialite. While many others in the room boasted old money, Natalia exuded a cosmopolitan sophistication. She spoke with an exotic accent and wore a tight black gown with a plunging neckline, just enough to dazzle, but not so much as to scream desperation. They exchanged a few pleasantries, bonded over a discussion about the potential philanthropic impacts of the event, and parted with curious smiles. Within days, Natalia seemed to manifest wherever Alexander went. He would arrive at luncheons or brand endorsement soirees, only to find her sitting at an adjacent table swirling her wine glass, giving him sly glances. During an exclusive art gallery premiere, she cornered him next to a marble statue of the Greek goddess Aphrodite. Under the soft glow of gallery lights, Natalia told him stories of her hometown of old Spanish estates and how she was searching for something more in life, something thrilling. She leaned in close, and he caught the slightest trace of her perfume, a seductive blend of jasmine and spice. The conversation fizzled into a wordless tension. Alexander, normally so confident, felt a ripple of excitement course through him. He struggled to tame the fire Natalia was lighting in him, all while maintaining his mask of composure. Their mutual attraction was obvious, yet the lines of impropriety hovered around them like tripwires, especially since Alexander was still married indeed, a father-to-be. Over time, their encounters became more orchestrated. Natalia would invite him to business dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants. Their exchanges escalated from polite banter about mergers and philanthropic pursuits to something charged with desire. In the back of his mind, Alexander told himself he was merely exploring a new potential investor for Caldwell Industries. But each stolen glance, each lingering hand on the small of Natalia's back, suggested another truth, that he craved what she offered. She was spontaneous, where his wife was predictable, provocative, where his life had grown routine. Neither recognized how quickly these sparks would ignite into a wildfire of scandal. Or perhaps they did, and welcomed it. For Alexander, falling under Natalia's spell was about more than a physical attraction. It was the promise of escaping a life that, for all its wealth and privilege, felt like a golden cage. The fateful shift came on a warm Saturday evening. Alexander and Natalia were in his private suite at the Caldwell Tower, a 60-story luxury complex that Caldwell Industries owned in downtown Los Angeles. Originally, the suite was reserved for top-tier business clients or visiting family members who needed a place in the city. That night, it became the secret rendezvous for a man edging toward betrayal. Candlelight flickered against the white leather couches, and the windows offered a sweeping view of the city skyline. Natalia turned on soft jazz, leaning back with a glass of Chateau Margaux, the faintest of smiles dancing on her lips, so she said, raising her glass to new beginnings. Alexander felt guilt stir inside him. He pictured Rebecca at home, waiting for him, perhaps placing a protective hand over her growing belly. In a moment of clarity, he nearly rose to leave, This was his chance to walk away, to salvage his marriage and his integrity. But Natalia slid closer, the scent of her perfume enveloping him. She lifted his chin, her eyes flashing with a heady mix of desire and confidence. The guilt turned into something else, a feverish intoxication that pushed every moral boundary aside. New beginnings, he echoed, clinking his glass against hers, before taking a long sip. That night, they crossed the line. In the hush of dawn, as Natalia slept on the plush bedding, Alexander stared at the ceiling, grappling with the weight of his actions. He had broken the vows that the world had seen him take a vow to remain faithful to his wife. Yet an odd sense of thrill coursed through him. In the following weeks, he convinced himself that this affair was a phase, a fleeting fling, something that wouldn't last. But as the office grew busier, as the pregnancy advanced, and Rebecca's attention shifted to prenatal care, Natalia claimed more territory in Alexander's life. He found himself texting her late into the night. Instead of turning to his wife for warmth, he sought it in Natalia's whispered confessions and laughter. Their meetings at Caldwell Tower became more frequent, and soon Natalia was subtly moving in items of her own, an expensive hairbrush on the bathroom counter, a silk robe in the closet, expensive Spanish slippers by the bed. Meanwhile, Rebecca felt Alexander's absence acutely. The doctors had recently informed her that her pregnancy required extra care, bed rest for a few weeks, routine checkups for potential complications. She tried to reach out to her husband, only to find his phone on silent or forever in the hands of an overworked assistant. In truth, Alexander did feel pangs of concern. He'd send flowers sign extravagant get-well-soon cards, and vow he'd be by her side when the baby arrived. But the entanglement with Natalia took precedence in his mind, fueling his reckless sense of invincibility. All around him, rumors began to spread. Trusted staff at Caldwell Tower saw Natalia entering Alexander's private suite at odd hours. The hush of the corridors whispered with speculation. Photographers sometimes captured the two together at exclusive nightclubs. Alexander, in his arrogance, believed that with enough money and power, he could contain any scandal. But he failed to realize once rumors start swirling among the elite, they move with alarming speed. Soon the seeds of a very public downfall were sown. Rebecca Caldwell was as poised as any high society woman could be. But beneath her composed exterior, she trembled with concern. The changes in Alexander's behavior were impossible to ignore. He spent more nights away from home, answered fewer phone calls, and rarely accompanied her to the many prenatal visits her doctor insisted upon. Worse, the staff began acting strangely around her. She'd catch them exchanging discreet, pitying glances whenever she mentioned Alexander's name. One late afternoon, as a nurse drew blood for routine tests, Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Intrigued, she opened it. The message read, "I'm sorry you have to go through this. He's not being discreet." There's another woman. Photos exist. Her stomach flipped. She tried to maintain her composure, but her mind spiraled into every possible scenario. That evening she confronted Alexander, or attempted to. He had arrived home well past midnight, the whiff of perfume clinging to his collar. By then the house was dark, and Rebecca had been pacing the corridors for hours. Heart-pounding, she cornered him in the foyer. "Alexander," she began. Shakily, "Tell me what's going on. I can't keep pretending things are normal." He sighed, slipping off his blazer, eyes averted. "I've been busy with work, you know that. Launching new projects, endless investor meetings." His voice was tight, as though each word was carefully chosen to minimize confrontation. But Rebecca pressed on. "I got a text today," she said, "from someone who claims that you're having an affair." Alexander stiffened, his handsome features setting into a mask of indifference. "Rumors, that's all," he retorted, trying to sound casual. "You know how tabloids can be. Someone's jealous, or a competitor wants to smear me." She held his gaze. "I'm not interested in tabloids. I'm interested in the truth. I'm pregnant with your child, Alexander. I deserve honesty." For a fleeting moment, Alexander thought about confessing, if only to lighten the guilt that weighed on him. Yet fear of losing control and losing face kept him silent. "There's nothing to worry about," he said finally, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Focus on your health. Our child is what matters." That night, Rebecca cried herself to sleep, while he retreated into his study, poring over documents, and only occasionally glancing at his phone where Natalia's messages glowed. Torn between the impending birth of his child and the allure of his mistress, Alexander convinced himself he could juggle both roles, devoted father and lover, to another woman. Yet neither role felt satisfying. Each demanded more than he could give. Over the next weeks, Rebecca's worst fears materialized. She discovered charges for dinners at restaurants she never visited, credit card bills for hotel suites in her own family's name. She called old friends trying to verify the rumors. Finally, in a moment of heartbreak and clarity, she confronted the ugly truth: her husband, the father of her unborn child, was indeed having an affair. But she also realized that no amount of tearful confrontation would stop him. With a heavy heart, Rebecca decided she had to leave at least for a while, and so quietly she slipped away, carrying both her heartbreak and their unborn child toward an uncertain future. Just as Alexander was beginning to believe he could live this double life indefinitely, his father, Arthur Caldwell, made his disapproval known. Tall, with a commanding presence and silver-streaked hair, Arthur had a reputation for controlling every aspect of his public image and that of his family. When he caught wind of the rumors swirling around Alexander, he summoned his son to the Caldwell patriarch's private study, a room reserved for confrontations and sealed business deals. Arriving at his father's estate, Alexander navigated the grand halls with a mixture of apprehension and defiance. He found Arthur seated behind a mahogany desk, poring over spreadsheets of the latest Caldwell Industries venture. Behind him hung a massive portrait of Sir Theodore Caldwell, as though even from beyond the grave, the family's founder was overseeing every conversation. Arthur didn't bother with pleasantries. "Sit." He barely looked up, gesturing to a leather armchair. Alexander took his seat. "Father," he began, attempting a cordial tone. Arthur set aside his documents and fixed Alexander with an unflinching gaze. "Are you truly so reckless that you'd jeopardize this family's reputation just to indulge some idle passion?" Alexander swallowed. He felt cornered, the massive portrait behind his father, making him feel as though two pairs of critical eyes were scrutinizing him. "I have everything under control," he lied. Arthur's jaw tightened. "Have you forgotten you have a wife, and that she carries the next Caldwell heir? This family has built its empire on discipline and unity, not scandal." Alexander bristled. "You talk about discipline, but what about happiness? I'm tired of living by your script. My life isn't just about building your empire. I have needs, too. And Rebecca." Rebecca left, so it's not as though there's harmony to maintain. Arthur leaned forward, his voice low. "She's left. Good God. Do you realize the press fallout, if that becomes public knowledge? I'll tell you this, son. I won't allow you to drag our name through the mud. Rebecca is still your wife. At the very least, you must see her through this pregnancy. If the media gets a whiff that you're gallivanting with some mistress while your pregnant wife is MIA, our stock prices will nosedive." Alexander exhaled. In that moment, all the illusions he'd clung to about having it all started to feel like a house of cards. "Let's not pretend you care about Rebecca," he snapped. "This is about business, like always." His father's glare could have frozen fire. "Listen carefully, I'm giving you one chance to salvage this. Find Rebecca. Make amends. And for God's sake, end your affair with that woman. If you don't, you'll find yourself cut off from the company, the inheritance, all of it. Do you hear me?" The ultimatum hung in the air like a guillotine, and Alexander found himself at a crossroads. Deep down, he knew his father spoke from a place of real concern for the family legacy. But the rebellious streak in him surged. Perhaps he was tired of being tethered to his father's script. Perhaps the thrill of Natalia was too much to relinquish. One thing was clear: whichever path he chose, a storm was coming. One that would threaten not just his fortune, but his entire identity. Meanwhile, Natalia Coronado had orchestrated her place in Alexander's life with calculated precision. Born into modest circumstances in Barcelona, she had learned at a young age that beauty and wits could be powerful currency. She moved to the United States initially for business school, but found American high society far more pliable to her ambitions. When she met Alexander, she recognized a golden ticket. He was a handsome scion, wealthy, bored, and eager to break free from his family's constraints. She saw in him not just a lover, but a stepping stone to greater influence. Over whispered conversations in his private suite, she painted visions of an adventurous life, traveling the world, attending exclusive events, and even mingling with philanthropic giants. She hinted at possibly connecting him to certain philanthropic circles she knew, like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, to expand the Caldwell philanthropic arm. These illusions dazzled Alexander, who was desperate for excitement beyond the carefully curated Caldwell brand. Now that Alexander was at odds with his father, and separated at least physically from Rebecca, Natalia sensed an opportunity to tighten her hold. She subtly encouraged him to stand up to Arthur Caldwell. In bed, she'd stroke his hair and whisper, "Why not create your own empire, my love? You have the knowledge, the capital, and the ambition. You don't need to be under your father's thumb forever." But for all her grand talk of empire-building, Natalia's true motives were more immediate. She wanted to secure her position. She disliked living in a constant state of uncertainty, like a clandestine affair that could end the moment Alexander's conscience flared up. She needed a firm grip on his heart and his bank accounts. Late one evening, she pressed him with a question. "Where do we go from here, Alex? I'm tired of sneaking around. I want something real." Her voice trembled, the tears glistening in her eyes, so convincing it was impossible to tell if they were genuine or part of her flawless performance. Alexander wavered. "My father has threatened to cut me off if I don't fix things with Rebecca," he admitted. "He says the scandal will ruin our family name. Stocks will crash. We'll lose credibility with investors." Natalia let out a theatrical sigh, running her fingers through his hair. "Don't you see? This is emotional blackmail. You're a grown man, one of the shrewdest businessmen I've ever met. Start your own firm, or better yet, let's carve out a path that's ours, not Arthur Caldwell's." Her unwavering confidence seduced him. For so long, Alexander's identity had been tied to Caldwell Industries, his father's approval, and the unspoken expectations of high society. With Natalia, the possibility of independence and forging his own destiny seemed suddenly tangible. It was exhilarating and terrifying. In that moment, he made a critical decision. Defying his father's ultimatum, he would remain with Natalia. He would, he told himself, settle the business of his marriage soon enough. But for now, the lure of a new life drowned out the faint voices of conscience and loyalty. He took Natalia in his arms, silently, vowing that no one, not even Arthur Caldwell, would keep him from what he wanted. Neither realized how dire the consequences would be. In a shocking move that sent ripples through social media and mainstream news, Alexander decided to marry Natalia Coronado. The decision was as rash as it was scandalous. It began with Natalia unveiling a small velvet box containing a diamond-encrusted ring she had secretly purchased for herself, a demonstration of how certain she was that Alexander would commit. One look at her teary smile, her whispered vow that, "We can conquer anything together," and Alexander found himself proposing on the spot, forgetting that he was still legally married to Rebecca. The fiasco escalated quickly. A hush fell over even Alexander's close confidants when they learned of his plan. Some tried to reason with him. "Are you insane?" hissed his best friend, Damian Walsh, over the phone. "What about Rebecca and your unborn child?" But Alexander waved them off. He had convinced himself that Rebecca wanted nothing more to do with him. He also assumed the divorce paperwork would be a mere formality. Money could smooth over any legal complications, or so he believed. Natalia commandeered the wedding preparations. No time for a grand event, she decided, given the swirling rumors and the risk of paparazzi mania. Instead, they arranged a quick private ceremony on a lavish yacht off the coast of Malibu. Guests were few, mostly individuals from Natalia's circle, along with a handful of Caldwell Industries executives who still curried favor with Alexander. By design, the wedding day exuded exclusivity and secrecy, a hush-hush affair to keep the press at bay, at least until they were ready to make headlines on their own terms. Despite the improvised nature of the event, the yacht sparkled under the afternoon sun, decorated with white orchids and gold accents. Natalia wore a curve-hugging gown that accentuated her dramatic figure, while Alexander opted for an off-white linen suit, the Californian breeze tousling his dark hair. Vows were exchanged on the yacht's deck, with the sound of seagulls overhead and the rolling waves beneath them. In that moment, Alexander felt an odd sense of triumph, as if by taking this bold step, he was finally free from the shadows of his father and the obligations of a marriage that no longer existed in his mind. Yet even amid the toasts of champagne and the gentle sea air, a nagging feeling gripped him. This wedding lacked the warmth and authenticity of his marriage to Rebecca. There were no family members weeping with joy, no longtime friends relishing in a day of genuine celebration. Instead, a stiff formality pervaded the gathering. Strangers in designer sunglasses raised glasses to a union they barely understood. Within hours, the news broke online. Social media exploded with disbelief. Alexander Caldwell weds. Mistress, while still married, read one salacious headline. Another paper wrote, "High society heir commits bigamy." Or did he secure a quickie divorce? The Caldwell name was officially thrown into public scandal, overshadowing any illusions of discreet grandeur. By nightfall, Arthur Caldwell had left dozens of furious messages promising to disown Alexander if he didn't reverse this course. But Alexander tuned them out. He was for now newly and brazenly married to a woman he believed embodied his long-craved freedom. If only he had known that his original wife, Rebecca, was about to re-emerge in a way that would shake him to his core. News of Alexander's yacht wedding reached Rebecca Caldwell while she was quietly residing in a remote beach cottage just outside Santa Barbara. She had taken refuge there, supported by her close friend Catherine, a psychologist who had offered a safe space. The day the scandalous headlines hit, Rebecca felt numb. Her fears and suspicions had been validated far more publicly than she ever anticipated. Once she had loved Alexander fervently, believing in the warmth hidden beneath his cultivated poise. Now he had shattered that trust in one final spectacular betrayal. Yet as her child kicked in her womb, Rebecca realized she couldn't simply vanish from this narrative. She had the future of her child to consider, an innocent being who deserved a chance at a stable life. Ignoring her heartbreak, she consulted her family's longtime lawyer, Mitchell Rollins, a seasoned attorney known for his tenacity. When Mitchell heard the details, Alexander's bigamy, the public fiasco, the compromised well-being of Rebecca, his anger matched hers. "This is outrageous," Mitchell fumed. "No one can just step over you like that. We need to protect your rights and the rights of your unborn child. There are significant assets at stake." So days later, Rebecca re-entered Los Angeles, bracing herself for the media circus. She checked into a discreet 5-star hotel under an assumed name. With Mitchell at her side, she scheduled a crucial meeting with Caldwell family advisors to discuss paternity issues, custody rights, and the marriage fiasco. Mitchell warned her that this would be an uphill battle. Alexander might claim you abandoned him, or that the marriage was already dissolved. We have to be prepared. In a stroke of dramatic timing, Rebecca's re-emergence coincided with a fundraising gala that Caldwell Industries was hosting for a children's hospital, an event that Alexander and Natalia were expected to attend. Fueled by Mitchell's strategic sense of theatrics, Rebecca decided to appear at the gala. It would serve two purposes: publicly asserting her rightful position and forcing a direct confrontation with Alexander that no press outlet could ignore. The gala was a grand affair, set in an opulent ballroom with crystal chandeliers and velvet drapes. Guests sipped champagne, murmuring about the swirling rumors regarding the Caldwell heir. When Rebecca arrived, her baby bump visible under a flowing emerald gown, the crowd parted as if parted by an invisible hand. Gasps and whispers followed. "She's back. And she's pregnant." Cameras clicked furiously. At the far end of the room, Alexander turned pale at the sight of his wife, who was still legally his wife, despite his questionable new vows to Natalia. Natalia clutched his arm, her eyes narrowing in annoyance or perhaps fear. Rebecca walked straight up to them, her expression poised but unyielding. The hush that fell over the ballroom was absolute. "I think," Rebecca said calmly, voice trembling but determined, "we have a few things to discuss." In that moment, everyone sensed that the calm was only momentary, a brief stillness before the storm truly broke. Alexander couldn't find his voice as he stared at Rebecca. For a few agonizing seconds, he was transported back to the early days of their marriage, when he'd sworn to protect her smile at all costs. The memory clashed violently with the reality of Natalia standing possessively at his side, the ring on her finger glinting under the chandelier lights. Rebecca broke the silence. "Alexander, we need to talk privately." A flush crept over Natalia's cheeks. "Anything you have to say to him, you can say in front of me," she snapped, trying to project a confidence that wavered in the face of Rebecca's calm. Mitchell Rollins stepped forward from the crowd. "I'm afraid the law disagrees," he said coldly. "There are urgent matters of paternity and marital status here." Alexander glanced at Natalia, who tightened her grip on his arm. Finally, he shrugged free and followed Rebecca and Mitchell into a secluded alcove near the rear of the ballroom. Glancing over her shoulder, Rebecca noticed Natalia glaring after them, but for once, she didn't care. Once out of earshot, Mitchell leveled a steely gaze at Alexander. Your hasty marriage to Miss Coronado is legally questionable. That, however, is just the start. Rebecca's pregnancy is nearing its final term. There are significant legal and financial implications for your child, Mr. Caldwell, and you cannot simply ignore them. Rebecca inhaled, fighting the tremor in her voice. I didn't come here to beg, she said. I came because our child deserves a father who at least acknowledges them. And I need to know, are you going to face your responsibilities, or are you going to keep playing games for the cameras? Alexander ran a hand through his hair, eyes lowered. Of course I care about the baby, Rebecca, he muttered, guilt warring with confusion. But Natalia and I, things have changed. Have they? Mitchell interjected sharply. Because let me remind you, in the eyes of the law, you're still married to Rebecca. That means your union with Ms. Coronado is not recognized. Further, any attempt to block or deny paternity for your child could result in a lengthy legal battle that could damage Caldwell Industries far more than your father ever threatened. Alexander's heart pounded. He tried to remember the defiance that had led him to Natalia, but the mention of his unborn child made him feel unsteady. Had he become the kind of man who turned his back on his own flesh and blood? Rebecca's voice softened. I'm not seeking to ruin your life, Alex. But you've put me in a position where I have to fight for our child's future. And her voice broke slightly. I loved you once. I won't let you strip me of my dignity. In that moment, a flash from a camera startled them. A rogue reporter had snuck in. Alexander's eyes flickered, and he realized how precarious his situation was. One wrong move, and the entire narrative, his marriage, fatherhood, and business reputation, would disintegrate under public scrutiny. He looked at Rebecca's determined face, then at Mitchell's grim resolve. For the first time, he truly understood that he was on the brink of losing everything. The day following the gala, the media had a field day splashing headlines about the scandalous Caldwell love triangle across tabloids and evening news. Fans of celebrity gossip sipped lattes in trendy cafes, whispering about how Alexander had brazenly wed another woman, while his pregnant wife had seemingly vanished into thin air, only to reappear in dramatic fashion. Caldwell Industries' stock took a noticeable dip, triggered by the uncertainty swirling around the family's reputation. Alexander faced a barrage of confrontations. His father, Arthur Caldwell, summoned him again, this time to the Caldwell Industries headquarters. The tension was palpable as Alexander stepped into the executive conference room. Portraits of the company's founders and family members lined the walls, each face silently judging him. Have you lost your mind entirely? Arthur hissed. You've not only disobeyed me, but you've invited a scandal that's crashing our share prices. Do you understand the ramifications for our investors? Alexander, having spent a sleepless night reckoning with his conflicted feelings, merely responded, It's not just about the company. We're talking about real people, Rebecca, and now Natalia. My child is due soon. I need time to think. But Arthur dismissed the notion of personal reflection. You don't have time, boy. You either fix this or watch our empire crumble. And by fix, I mean finalize your divorce from Rebecca properly. Ensure custody arrangements are hammered out and rectify this marriage debacle. You can't remain in this uncertain state. Meanwhile, Natalia was growing restless. The wedding fiasco, which she had hoped would cement her status, had instead brought unrelenting negative publicity. Paparazzi camped outside her condo. Reporters hounded her for statements about the bigamy allegations. Her phone buzzed incessantly with messages from unknown numbers, some ridiculing her, others threatening. Under the strain, her once unflappable poise cracked. Darling, she pleaded with Alexander over a candlelit dinner she'd forced him to attend at her penthouse. I can't live like this. It's a PR nightmare. My business prospects are drying up. Your father is sabotaging my opportunities. We need a strong public statement affirming our marriage, or you need to handle this with Rebecca. Alexander stared into the flickering candlelight, remembering how certain and exhilarating Natalia had once seemed. Now she wore the worry of someone who might lose everything, and he couldn't deny that her desperation unsettled him. Yet a part of him felt an odd sense of loyalty to Rebecca, his first love, the mother of his child. Could he really cast her aside in favor of a union he'd rushed into under the heat of passion and rebellion? Across town, Rebecca and Mitchell were assembling a legal strategy. Rebecca felt worn and drained, her pregnancy nearing its final weeks, but her resolve hadn't waned. She needed to ensure her child's security, financially and emotionally. She also fought against the part of her heart that still yearned for the old Alexander, the man who used to make her laugh with silly jokes at dinner parties. But that man seemed lost behind the facade of an empire. With each passing day, the Caldwell saga became more than a personal tragedy. It morphed into a public spectacle where everyone from business moguls to gossip columnists waited with bated breath to see which side Alexander would choose. And in the eye of the storm stood a baby, not yet born, whose future hung precariously on its father's next move. Just a month before Rebecca's due date, she stood at the threshold of Alexander's private suite in Caldwell Tower. The location wasn't her choice. Mitchell had arranged it, citing privacy and a neutral setting away from the media circus. Still, her heart pounded as she waited for the security detail to buzz her in. When the doors opened, she stepped inside, her silhouette framed by the bright corridor behind her. The suite was immaculate, almost cold. It bore no traces of the life they once shared. No family photos, no shared memories, just minimalist luxury and towering windows framing the glittering Los Angeles skyline. Alexander was already there, pacing near the bar. His suit jacket was off sleeves, rolled to his elbows, tension radiating from every movement. Natalia wasn't present, a condition Mitchell had insisted upon. Nearby, Mitchell quietly arranged papers on the marble table, his face unreadable. Rebecca entered slowly, one hand resting on her swollen belly. She looked calm, composed, but her eyes revealed everything. Pain, disappointment, exhaustion. "I need clarity, Alex," she said softly but firmly. "Not just for me. For our child. We can't keep drifting in limbo like this." Alexander turned, startled slightly by her presence, despite expecting her. For a moment he said nothing, just stared. Really stared at her. She looked radiant and tired all at once, the soft glow of pregnancy tinged with the emotional bruises of betrayal. He swallowed hard, guilt clawing at his throat. "I know," he said, voice low. "I'm sorry, Rebecca. I never meant for things to unravel like this." He rubbed his temple, finally sitting down across from her. "It just spiraled." Mitchell cleared his throat and began laying out the formalities. Custody proposals, child support agreements, estate protections for the unborn child. But the room was already full with unsaid things, with emotions that couldn't be captured in legal language. As Mitchell spoke, Rebecca blinked slowly, holding back the sting of tears. "How did we get here, Alex?" she asked, voice cracking slightly. "We had something real. I believed in us. In you." Do you even remember how we used to talk about names for our children at that vineyard in Napa? You said you wanted a daughter named Elise. Alexander's breath caught in his throat. That memory came rushing back, her laughter under the stars, their fingers intertwined on a soft picnic blanket. His eyes dropped to the table. I remember, he whispered. I remember all of it. Rebecca's voice trembled. Then why wasn't that enough? He looked up, shame flashing across his face. Because I was afraid of being ordinary, of being trapped in a role my father designed. Natalia, she made me feel like I could break out of that. She offered escape. And I mistook that for freedom. Rebecca let the silence stretch. The baby kicked, and she instinctively placed both hands on her belly. You call it freedom, she said slowly. But what you really chased was fantasy. A fantasy that burned down the life we were building. Across the room, Mitchell remained quiet, his eyes flicking between them. After a moment, he slid a key document forward. A formal separation agreement pending the birth. We're proposing amicable terms, he said. You'll maintain financial support, establish paternity legally, and acknowledge that your marriage to Natalia is invalid. Alexander stiffened. You want me to admit that my marriage doesn't exist? It doesn't, Mitchell replied coolly. Rebecca is still your legal wife. If you don't take this step now, you risk a scandal that will not only damage your business credibility, but could jeopardize custody later. Alexander's jaw tensed. He imagined the fallout, his father's fury, Natalia's tears, the press mauling him for betrayal on all sides. Yet none of it felt as pressing as the weight in Rebecca's eyes. A silent question hovered there. Are you going to be the man you promised to be? He leaned forward, hands clasped. I'll sign it, he said quietly. I won't contest child support or custody. I want to be involved in our child's life, if you'll allow it. Rebecca nodded once, her face unreadable. Relief washed over her, but it came tinged with sadness. She had fought hard for this moment, not to win, but to protect what truly mattered. Just then a soft shuffle echoed from behind the half-closed bedroom door. Rebecca and Alexander both turned. The door creaked slightly, and there, standing just in the shadows, was Natalia. She had come unannounced, no doubt, hoping to plead with Alexander after the meeting. But instead, she had overheard everything. Her eyes shimmered not with tears, but with fury held in check by sheer force of will. She stepped forward, arms crossed, her voice a whip of venom. So this is how it ends. Alexander stood up quickly. Natalia. I told you not to come today. Rebecca stood too, but not out of confrontation, more out of instinct to shield her child from the bitter storm gathering in the room. Natalia's gaze flicked between them. I see. The dutiful father act. The tragic wife. How convenient for you, Alexander. All this contrition now that your empire's cracking. Natalia, Alexander said sternly. This is not the time. No, she snapped. Because from where I'm standing, you're choosing the scandal that looks safer. But don't think I'll just vanish quietly. Before anyone could respond, she turned on her heel and stormed out, the echo of her stilettos like exclamation marks in the marble hallway. Rebecca let out a shaky breath. You need to clean this up, Alex. For real. No more secrets, no more masks. I will, he said. For the baby. And for everything I destroyed. And as the door closed behind her, Rebecca knew that while the confrontation was done, the consequences were just beginning. In the aftermath of the confrontation, the Caldwell Tower no longer felt like a sanctuary to Alexander. It felt like a cage. The walls whispered of choices he couldn't undo, and each echo reminded him of what he'd lost. For days after Rebecca's visit, he moved through his routines with a ghost-like detachment, while headlines blared his private shame in public Caldwell heir's secret. Wife and baby bombshell, mistress erupts after scandal breaks wide open. Natalia didn't take it quietly. She burst into the tower lobby 3 days later, flanked by a gossip-hungry paparazzo she'd tipped off herself. Her eyes, once seductive and calculating, were now wild with betrayal. Dressed in an ivory designer coat that failed to mask her trembling hands, she confronted Alexander in front of stunned staff and rolling cameras. "You lied to me," she screamed, voice cracking with a mixture of rage and despair. "You married me while still tied to her, and now you sign everything away to that woman, as if I meant nothing." Alexander tried to lead her away from the cameras, but Natalia slapped his hand away. "Don't you dare play noble now. I sacrificed everything for you. My business contacts, my privacy." "Privacy, my name." She pulled off her ring, the massive diamond, catching a final glint of spotlight before she hurled it across the marble floor. It clinked once before spinning to a stop near a cluster of speechless onlookers. Security had no choice. They escorted her out gently, though her screams echoed long after the doors closed. Reporters swarmed her outside the building, snapping shots as she sobbed theatrically into her hands, shouting, "He ruined me. Ask him who the real liar is." The footage went viral in minutes, but Alexander didn't flinch. He stood in the lobby, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. Something had changed in him, something irreversibly fractured. The illusions that had once lured him away from Rebecca now lay scattered across social media in trending hashtags and public shame. His impulsive escape had become a self-inflicted prison. Upstairs, Mitchell waited for him in the tower's conference suite. That was a spectacle, the lawyer muttered, switching off his phone as it buzzed non-stop. "You need to lie low. The press is spinning this into a soap opera, but our focus has to be the baby now." And it was. Days later, Alexander received the call he'd been bracing for. Rebecca had gone into labor. When he arrived at the hospital, breathless and uncertain, he found Catherine, Rebecca's psychologist friend, waiting outside the delivery room. She didn't speak right away, merely studying him with cautious eyes. "She's allowed you in," Catherine said after a beat. "But only because she knows this moment isn't about you. It's about your child." Alexander nodded. He shed his suit jacket, straightened his cuffs like a nervous schoolboy, and stepped through the doors. Inside, the scene was raw and real in a way that stripped him of all pretense. Rebecca's cheeks flushed with exhaustion, and determination lay propped up in the hospital bed. A nurse handed her the baby, a tiny wrinkled bundle wrapped in soft blue cotton. Their son. Alexander didn't dare speak at first. He watched transfixed as Rebecca held the infant to her chest, her expression softening as the baby whimpered and blinked against the bright lights. Finally, she looked up. "Would you like to hold him?" He froze. "Can I?" She nodded. "He's yours too." Hands trembling, Alexander stepped forward and accepted the child. The baby's weight was feather-light, but the emotion behind the moment threatened to crush him. Julian. That was the name Rebecca had chosen, let out a small coo, eyes fluttering open. Alexander felt something break open inside him. Not pain, not regret. Love. Raw, unfiltered, unconditional. It was the first time in months he felt something real. Rebecca watched him closely. She didn't say much. There was no need. In that quiet hospital room, layered with antiseptic and soft cries, they both understood that the past had shattered them. But this new life had tethered them together, whether they liked it or not. In the weeks that followed, the world continued to spin with drama, but a quiet transformation began. Natalia retreated from the public eye after her outburst. Her PR team tried to salvage what was left of her image, releasing vague statements about betrayal and moving forward. But her credibility within the elite social circuit had been scorched. She was no longer the mysterious investor from Barcelona. She was now tabloid fodder. Meanwhile, Arthur Caldwell sprang into action. He released a controlled interview through the Wall Street Journal, assuring investors that Caldwell Industries remained a fortress of discipline and long-term vision. He didn't mention Rebecca Alexander or the child by name, but the subtext was clear. The family was cleaning up its mess. Behind the scenes, a legal settlement quietly closed the door on Natalia's claims. She was paid a modest sum to walk away and never publicly contest the validity of her marriage to Alexander. The annulment was filed swiftly and finalized without fanfare. Alexander, for his part, moved into a smaller penthouse, not the opulent suite he once shared with Natalia, nor the childhood estate under his father's shadow. It was a blank slate, a place to begin again. He began attending parenting classes. He read books on newborn development. He met with therapists. He even asked Mitchell to draft a formal co-parenting agreement that gave Rebecca full custody, but with visitation rights built on trust, not entitlement. Each week he visited Julian. He changed diapers. He sang lullabies. He kissed the tiny curls atop his son's head and whispered apologies he didn't know how else to give. Rebecca remained guarded, but she noticed the changes. Alexander had stopped trying to be the charismatic heir, the rebel son, the misunderstood lover. He was simply a father now, and that for the first time made her feel safe. By the end of that summer, the headlines had moved on. A new celebrity scandal claimed the spotlight, and the Caldwell name quietly receded from public gossip. But something deeper had shifted. Rebecca and Alexander weren't lovers anymore. Perhaps they never would be again. But they had become something more enduring co-parents, anchored by a little boy who represented both the damage they had done and the hope they had somehow salvaged. And Julian, blissfully unaware of the chaos that preceded his birth, began to smile. In the end, Alexander's quest for love and excitement nearly cost him everything he held dear. His family, his reputation, and even his place in the empire he was destined to inherit. By confronting his mistakes, he found a path toward redemption, embracing a humbler sense of fatherhood instead of the shallow thrills that once lured him astray. Rebecca, though bruised by betrayal, discovered inner strength and chose to fight for her child's rightful future. Their harrowing journey, filled with scandal heartbreak and high-stakes drama, finally arrived at a hopeful crossroads, a reminder that even amid life's darkest twists, every ending can become a beginning. If this dramatic story of betrayal, redemption, and the unstoppable power of a mother's love kept you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to show your support. Like this video if you enjoyed the twists and turns, share it with friends who crave scandalous high society tales, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories that will keep you guessing until the very last word. Your engagement helps us continue creating content you love. So hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more drama intrigue and unforgettable characters.